News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. There's your closing bell for this Wednesday on Wall Street. The Federal Reserve cut rates and signaled 2 more reductions this year. But that announcement was already baked into prices, so stocks were driven lower. We do bring you the closing numbers each day here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 lost 6 points. NASDAQ lost 73 points. The Dow gained 261 points. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.07%. The 2-year yield at 3.54%. Federal Reserve officials did lower their benchmark interest rate by a 0.25 percentage point and penciled in 2 more reductions this year after months of intense pressure from the White House to slash costs. Former New York Fed President and Bloomberg opinion columnist Bill Dudley says this cut was about managing labor risks.
There's a lot of tension between the inflation outlook and the labor market outlook, but I think Powell said it pretty well. I mean, he said basically what we think that the risks on the unemployment side have risen more than the risks on the inflation side. And so given that, we should be less restrictive. And so we're taking out essentially a risk management cut to reflect the fact that the risks on the labor market seem to be a little bit higher.
Former New York Fed President and Bloomberg opinion columnist Bill Dudley. And Chair Jay Powell pointed to growing signs of weakness in the labor market to explain why officials decided it was time to cut rates after holding them steady since December.
Overall, the market slowing in both the supply of and demand for workers is unusual. In this less dynamic and somewhat softer labor market, the downside risks to employment appear to have risen.
Powell also spoke to the independence of the Fed, saying that the only way to sway the body is to make really strong arguments based on data. On Capitol Hill, in opening remarks for a hearing on the firing of the director for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Republican Senator Bill Cassidy asked if the body had failed.
If someone is fired 29 days after every Republican votes for her, the Senate confirms her, the secretary said in her swearing in that she has, quote, unimpeachable scientific credentials, like what happened? Did we fail?
Former CDC Director Susan Moneris told senators that Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. plans more changes to the national vaccination policy and that he wanted her cooperation regardless of scientific evidence. She says Kennedy also plans to change the childhood vaccine schedule, saying that he told her he'd be making those changes this month and that she needs to, quote, be on board with it. She believes she was fired for not going along with Kennedy's demands. StubHub shares fell below its IPO price, erasing early gains. The company sold 34 million shares at $23.50, and its market value is about $8.5 billion based on the outstanding shares listed in its earlier filings. StubHub chairman and CEO Eric Baker says after 25 years, it's time to look ahead.
What we're focused on now is we realize consumers don't care whether it's a primary ticket or a secondary ticket. They just want to access the live events that they want to go to and discover easily, safely, and so forth. And that system's been pretty broken for a long time, how those tickets are originally distributed. So we're really working on creating a better experience.
StubHub now trading at about $22 per share. Bank of America is shaking up its senior ranks with moves that narrow the slate of leaders who could one day succeed longtime CEO Brian Moynihan. Appearing on Bloomberg TV, Moynihan was asked if the company is setting up for a succession.
Long term, we have one of the duties that I and the whole management team owes the board of directors is a series of candidates that have the experience to run this company over time. I'm not going anywhere in the short term, but in the medium term, but it takes a while to set that up and get people used to the size and scale of this company.
And Moynihan says the company is raising its minimum wage to $25 per hour starting next month.
Where does that pay back for the investor? Where that pays back to the investor is the turnover rate when we started this program in the high volume operations groups and the branches was 20%. It's now down to basically 10% or so, and even below that. That stability and that career mindset allows us to do a much better job for our clients.
Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan was a guest on Bloomberg Surveillance. Catch that full conversation on the Bloomberg Talks podcast or on the Bloomberg podcast page on YouTube. Lyft is partnering with Waymo to offer robotaxi service in Nashville. Waymo will launch fully autonomous operations in Nashville in the coming months, and those rides will open up to the public next year. Lyft shares have jumped 14%. Housing starts in the U.S. fell last month to the lowest since May. Bloated home inventory slowed builders' appetites to boost production. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.